The dress was a masterpiece of silk and illusion, a cloud of ivory satin and delicate lace that cost more than my first car. It hung from the ornate closet door in my suite at the Grand Heritage Hotel, a silent, shimmering specter of the day to come. Tomorrow I would become Mrs. Alistair Thorne. The thought should have sent thrills of giddy anticipation through me. Instead it settled in my stomach like a lead weight, cold and immovable. I traced the intricate beadwork on the bodice, my reflection in the full-length mirror a pale imitation of a radiant bride. My chestnut hair was swept up in a messy bun, and my face free of the makeup artist's magic tomorrow would bring looked tired. The emerald on my left hand, a massive square-cut stone Alistair had presented on bended knee in the middle of a Michelin-starred restaurant, felt heavy and alien. "It's perfect, Eva," a soft voice said from the doorway. I turned to see my younger sister Lily, leaning against the frame. She was already in her silk pajamas, her blonde hair a cascade over her shoulders. Where I was all sharp angles and quiet intensity, Lily was softness and light. She was the sun to my moon, and I had spent my entire life protecting that light. "It is, isn't it?" I replied, my voice lacking conviction. Lily glided into the room, her expression concerned. "You're having cold feet. It's normal, everyone says so." "Is that what this is?" I murmured, more to myself than to her. "It just feels final." "That's because it is, silly." She wrapped her arms around me from behind, resting her chin on my shoulder. Our reflections stared back at us. "Alistair adores you. He's successful, handsome, and he comes from one of the most respected families in the city. Mom and Dad are over the moon. This is everything you've ever worked for." Was it? That was the question that had been haunting me in the quiet hours of the night. My working for? This had been a carefully curated performance since the day I met Alistair Thorne at a charity gala 2 years ago. My parents, solidly upper-middle class but fiercely ambitious, had seen him as the ultimate prize. And I, the dutiful daughter, had seen a path to stability, to a life free from financial worry, to making them proud. I had molded myself to fit his world. The galas, the charity boards, the tedious dinners with his father's business associates. I had tucked away my own dreams of becoming a documentary photographer, of traveling to remote corners of the world, and told myself that this security, this gilded life, was better. "He does adore you," Lily insisted, sensing my hesitation. "Remember when he flew in that chef from Paris for your birthday? Or when he had the garden at the Thorncrest estate redesigned just because you mentioned you loved peonies?" I remembered. Alistair's affection was always a grand, public gesture. It was never the quiet, intimate moments I secretly craved. It was a performance, and I was his leading lady. "I know," I said, forcing a smile for her sake. "I'm just tired. Pre-wedding jitters. Don't worry about me." She studied my face for a moment, her blue eyes so clear and trusting. "Hey, but if you need to talk, I'm here. Always." After she left, promising to see me in the morning for hair and makeup, the silence in the suite felt oppressive. The weight of the emerald ring was distracting. I slipped it off, placing it on the nightstand. The pale band of skin beneath was a stark reminder of the cage I was about to step into. A restlessness seized me. I needed air. I needed to remember who I was just for a moment. I changed out of my robe into a pair of jeans and a simple black sweater, pulling a wool coat over it. I wouldn't go far. Just a walk in the hotel gardens to clear my head. The hotel was a labyrinth of opulence. I took the service elevator, avoiding the main lobbies where late-night wedding guests might be milling about. I slipped out a side door into the cool night air. The gardens were vast, manicured to perfection, lit by soft, golden path lights. I walked without direction, my hands shoved deep into my coat pockets, the silence a balm to my frayed nerves. It was then that I heard them. Voices, low and tense, coming from the secluded gazebo shrouded in wisteria vines. One voice was unmistakably Alistair's, smooth and arrogant. The other, my breath hitched. It was Lily's. But it wasn't her usual cheerful tone. It was strained, almost pleading. A cold dread, entirely separate from my earlier anxiety, trickled down my spine. I moved off the path, my footsteps silent on the damp grass, and ducked behind a thick boxwood hedge, my heart hammering against my ribs. "You have to stop this, Alistair," Lily was saying, her voice trembling. "It's gone too far." "Don't be dramatic, Lily," Alistair replied, his tone dismissive. It's just a bit of fun. She doesn't have to know. She's my sister. And you're marrying her tomorrow. This is wrong. I can't do this anymore. My blood ran cold. Bit of fun. What were they talking about? A sickening suspicion began to uncoil in my gut. Your sister is a means to an end, Lily, Alistair said, his voice losing its polished edge and turning cold, transactional. A beautiful, well-mannered accessory. My father approves. The merger with her father's modest but profitable firm will be seamless with her as my wife. But you're the one I want. The world tilted on its axis. The night air felt suddenly thin, impossible to breathe. I fumbled in my coat pocket, my fingers numb, and pulled out my phone. With a shaking thumb, I opened the voice memo app and pressed record. You can't mean that, Lily whispered, and I could hear the tears in her voice. If you feel that way, why are you doing this? Call off the wedding. And 'cause a scandal? Tarnish the Thorne name? Don't be naive. This is how things are done. I'll have my respectable wife and I'll have you. It's perfect. It's not perfect, it's monstrous. I won't be your dirty secret, Alistair. I told Eva I thought she was making a mistake, but I never imagined this was why. She's too ambitious in her own quiet way. She has dreams, little ideas of a life beyond being Mrs. Thorne. You, my darling, are content. You're sweet. You're manageable. I felt the bile rise in my throat. Manageable. He was talking about my sister, the person I loved most in this world, as if she were a pet. Please, Lily begged. Just let me go. There was a rustle of movement. I risked a glance through the leaves. Alistair had stepped closer, cupping her face. Lily was rigid, her face pale in the moonlight. You don't mean that, he murmured, his voice dropping to that intimate, persuasive tone I knew all too well. This isn't over, Lily. It's only just beginning. And then he leaned in. Time slowed. I watched, paralyzed, as his lips met hers. It wasn't a brutal, forced kiss, but it wasn't welcomed either. It was possessive, claiming. Lily stood frozen for a moment before her hands came up, not to embrace him, but to push weakly against his chest. A soundless scream echoed in the cavern of my mind. The betrayal was a physical blow, so profound it emptied me of all feeling. The man I was to marry tomorrow, kissing my sister the night before our wedding. And his words, a means to an end, a respectable wife, you're the one I want. The recording app on my phone glowed, a tiny red beacon in the dark, capturing every damning second. As Alistair finally pulled away, whispering something I couldn't hear, I stopped the recording. My hands were steady now. The cold dread had been replaced by a glacial calm. I turned and walked silently back to the hotel, the weight of the phone in my pocket infinitely heavier than the emerald ring I'd left on the nightstand. The gilded cage was shattered. The performance was over. And tomorrow the curtain would rise on a very different final act. Sleep was an impossibility. I spent the hours between midnight and dawn sitting in a wingback chair by the window, watching the city lights twinkle like fallen stars. The recording on my phone was a live wire in the silent room, its existence both a horror and a weapon. I listened to it once, just once, my body rigid as Alistair's voice, so familiar and yet so alien, laid bare his monstrous calculus. I heard the soft, distressed sound Lily made, a sound he had clearly chosen to ignore. Then I saved it in 3 separate places. My phone, my cloud drive, and a USB stick I tucked into my makeup bag. The initial soul-rending pain had been cauterized by a cold, focused fury. This wasn't just a betrayal of my trust. It was a violation of my sister, a manipulation of my family, and the utter destruction of the future I had, however reluctantly, agreed to. He hadn't just broken my heart. He had tried to annihilate my agency, to reduce me to a pawn in his corporate and personal chess game. Well, Alistair Thorne was about to learn that pawns could checkmate kings. When the first rays of dawn painted the sky in hues of rose and gold, I felt unnervingly calm. My reflection in the window showed a woman with hollow eyes and a set, determined jaw. The bride was gone. In her place was an avenger. At 7 a.m. the suite erupted into a flurry of activity. My mother, resplendent in a lavender suit, fussed over the schedule. The hairstylist and makeup artist arrived with their cases of magic potions and tools. Lily slipped in, her eyes puffy and shadowed. She couldn't meet my gaze. Rough night? I asked, my voice deceptively light as the makeup artist dabbed primer on my face. Lily flinched. I didn't sleep well. Nerves. I know the feeling, I said, holding her gaze in the mirror until she looked away, guilt etched on every feature. I felt a pang of sorrow for her. She was a victim in this too, caught in the web of a charming predator. My anger was not for her. It was for him. As they worked on me, transforming the pale, tired woman into a vision of bridal perfection, I mentally rehearsed my own transformation. The walk down the aisle. The smile. The vows. It would be my greatest performance. You look stunning, Eva, my mother breathed when they were finished, dabbing at her eyes. Absolutely radiant. I looked at the stranger in the mirror. The ivory dress fit like a second skin, the lace sleeves delicate, the train a river of satin. My hair was an intricate twist of curls and braids, with a few artful strands framing my face. The makeup was flawless, highlighting my cheekbones, making my eyes look larger, greener. I looked the part of the blushing bride. But inside I was clad in armor. I reached for the emerald ring on the nightstand and slid it back onto my finger. Its weight was no longer that of a cage but of a key. The key to his ruin. The ceremony was to be held in the hotel's grand ballroom, transformed into a cathedral of white flowers and shimmering fabric. My father arrived, his eyes misty as he took my arm. "Ready, sweetheart?" he asked, his voice thick with emotion. I squeezed his arm. "More than you know, Dad." The first notes of the wedding march swelled and the massive double doors swung open. A collective gasp rippled through the 200 guests as they rose to their feet. Every influential name in the city was here. The Thorne family, seated in the front row, looked on with smug satisfaction. Alistair stood at the altar, impossibly handsome in his tailored tuxedo, a smile of triumphant possession on his face. I walked slowly, my arm linked with my father's, my smile serene. I met Alistair's gaze and saw nothing but avarice and pride. He saw the dress, the title, the merger. He didn't see me. We reached the altar. My father kissed my cheek and placed my hand in Alistair's. His grip was firm, possessive. I wanted to snatch my hand back to wipe it clean. But I didn't. I simply smiled. The minister began the timeless liturgy. I barely heard the words. My focus was on the small wireless speaker I had discreetly tucked into the bouquet of white roses and peonies I carried. It was connected to my phone, which was in a hidden pocket sewn into the folds of my dress. "Dearly beloved," the minister intoned, "we are gathered here today to join this man and this woman in holy matrimony." I looked at Alistair, my expression one of beatific love. He smiled back, a practiced, perfect smile. We went through the motions. The readings. The hymns. And then the moment for the vows arrived. If anyone present can show just cause why this man and this woman may not be lawfully joined together, let them speak now or forever hold their peace. The traditional pause followed. A room full of held breath. This was my cue. I didn't look at the minister. I looked directly at Alistair, my smile never wavering. "Actually," I said, my voice clear and steady, amplified by the microphone pinned to the minister's robes. "I have something to say." A confused murmur ran through the crowd. Alistair's smile tightened. "Eva, darling," he said through gritted teeth, his voice a low warning. "Not now." "Oh, I think now is the perfect time," I said, my voice sweet as poison. I gently extracted my hand from his. "Before we make vows before God and all these people, I think they deserve to know the man you truly are." I reached into my bouquet and pulled out the small speaker, holding it up. With my other hand I retrieved my phone from my dress pocket. The guests were utterly silent, a sea of bewildered faces. I saw my mother's hand fly to her mouth. I saw Lily among the bridesmaids go deathly pale. "What is the meaning of this?" Alistair's father boomed from the front row. "This," I said, my finger hovering over the play button on my phone, "is the sound of true love, Mr. Thorne. Your son's, to be precise." I tapped the screen. For a moment, there was only the faint hiss of the recording. And then Alistair's voice, crisp and unmistakable, filled the grand ballroom. "Your sister is a means to an end, Lily. A beautiful, well-mannered accessory. But you're the one I want." The gasps were sharp, immediate. Alistair's face drained of all color. He stared at me, his eyes wide with a mixture of horror and rage. "You can't mean that. If you feel that way, why are you doing this? Call off the wedding. And 'cause a scandal? Tarnish the Thorne name? Don't be naive. This is how things are done. I'll have my respectable wife and I'll have you. It's perfect. The crowd was in an uproar. I saw Lily bury her face in her hands, her shoulders shaking. My father looked from me to Alistair, his expression one of dawning, furious comprehension. Please. Just let me go. The rustle of movement. A tense pause. And then the sound of the kiss. It wasn't visual, but it was unmistakable. The soft, intimate sound of it, followed by Lily's muffled, distressed whimper. I stopped the recording. The silence that followed was deafening, thick with shock and revulsion. I turned to Alistair. The mask was gone, replaced by sheer, unadulterated panic. Eva, that's not, it's out of context. He came on to me. She's always been jealous of you. His lies were pathetic, transparent. I didn't say a word. I simply looked at him, my gaze cold and steady. Then I raised my left hand, the massive emerald catching the light. I worked the ring over my knuckle, the sound of the metal band scraping against my skin unnaturally loud in the silent room. I held it up between my thumb and forefinger, letting everyone see it. Letting everyone understand. You wanted a respectable wife, Alistair, I said, my voice cutting through the silence like shards of glass. You wanted a merger. You can keep your name. You can keep your company. But you will not have me. And with all the force of my shattered dreams and newfound strength, I threw the ring. It hit him square in the face, a sharp, stinging blow before clattering to the floor at his feet. The ballroom erupted into chaos. Cameras flashed. Guests stood shouting, pointing. The Thorne family was a tableau of fury and humiliation. I didn't wait for his response. I didn't look back at my family. I gathered the heavy satin of my skirt in my hands, turned on my heel, and walked back down the aisle I had just paraded up as a bride. I walked through the stunned silence and the rising cacophony, my head held high, a serpent in a wedding dress, leaving my ruined groom and my old life behind me. The walk from the ballroom to the hotel suite felt like moving through a different dimension. The opulent hallways, once a symbol of the life I was entering, were now just a passageway out. Sounds of chaos, shouts, cries, the frantic buzzing of phones, echoed from behind me, but in my immediate vicinity, there was a surreal, pressurized silence. Hotel staff, having clearly gotten wind of the scandal, averted their eyes as I passed, a ghost in white satin. I didn't run. I walked with a deliberate, steady pace, my wedding train whispering against the marble floor. The adrenaline that had fueled my public execution was beginning to recede, leaving a strange, hollow calm in its wake. There was no room for hysterics. Not yet. The plan was only half complete. Back in the suite, the scene of my earlier transformation, the silence was absolute. The empty garment bags, the scattered bobby pins, the half-empty flute of champagne from my mother. It all felt like artifacts from a past life. I methodically locked the door behind me. My first act was to shred the wedding dress. It wasn't an act of rage, but of necessity. I couldn't walk out of here in this costume. I struggled with the countless tiny buttons down the back, my fingers clumsy, until I finally wrenched it over my head. The delicate lace tore at the shoulder with a satisfying rip. I left the expensive ruin in a heap on the floor, a puddle of spoiled ivory. I changed into the simple, practical clothes I'd worn on my fateful garden walk. The jeans, the black sweater, the wool coat. I felt instantly lighter, more myself than I had in 2 years. I packed a single large backpack with ruthless efficiency. Passport, wallet, the USB stick with the recording, my professional-grade camera and lenses, a handful of practical clothes. I left behind the jewelry, the designer handbags, all the trappings of Eva the fiancée. I was shedding his skin. A frantic pounding started at the door. Eva. Eva, open this door. What have you done? It was my mother, her voice shrill with panic and social terror. I didn't answer. I finished zipping the backpack and slung it over my shoulders. Eva, please. The Thornes are furious. Alistair is saying Lily seduced him. We have to fix this. That sealed it. Even now, her primary concern was damage control, aligning with the powerful Thornes. There was no we here. Not anymore. I went to the window. My suite was on the 3rd floor. Too high to jump, but I'd planned for this. I pulled a coil of knotted rope, a purchase I'd made online weeks ago for a photography project, from under the bed. I secured one end to the leg of the heavy cast-iron bed frame and threw the other out the window. It was a reckless, dramatic move, but it felt fitting. A clean escape away from the voices at the door. I climbed out, my hands gripping the rough rope, and descended quickly, my backpack thudding against my side. I dropped the last few feet into a secluded hedgerow, startling a pigeon. I brushed the dirt from my jeans, my heart finally beginning to race. I was out. I had a burner phone in my pocket. I powered it on and sent a single pre-written email to a private, secure address. The subject line was simply, Launch Protocol Persephone. It was a melodramatic name I'd given my contingency plan, a plan I'd drafted in secret during the loneliest nights of my engagement. It triggered the automatic release of the recording to 3 major news outlets and a popular, anonymous gossip blog known for tearing down the powerful. Alistair had tried to hide his sins in a shadowy garden. I was going to broadcast them to the world. My next call was to a number I knew by heart. "It's done," I said when he answered. A low whistle came from the other end. "The internet is already losing its mind. You really did it, Eva. You glorious, terrifying woman." Liam, my former college boyfriend, now a brilliant and discreet digital security expert. He was the only person I'd trusted with my plan. He was the one who had helped me secure the recording, who had set up the dead man switch email. "Is the financial part ready?" I asked, my voice all business. "Transfers are complete. The accounts you set up under your grandmother's maiden name are fully funded. Your flight to Reykjavik leaves in 3 hours. Your first-class ticket and a reservation at the Retreat Blue Lagoon are confirmed. You'll disappear like a ghost." A sob threatened to rise in my throat, but I swallowed it down. "Thank you, Liam. I don't know how to." "Don't," he said softly. "Just go. Be free. And send me a postcard from somewhere with no Wi-Fi." I ended the call and hailed a cab. As it pulled away from the Grand Heritage Hotel, I allowed myself one last look. It was a scene of beautiful chaos. News vans were already pulling up. Paparazzi swarmed the entrance. The Golden Cage was now a very public fishbowl, and the prized fish was floundering. The cab driver, an older man with kind eyes, glanced at me in the rearview mirror. "Rough day." I almost laughed. "You could say that. The airport, please." As we drove, I scrolled through the news on my burner phone. It was everywhere. Thorne heir's wedding day scandal. Groom's shocking betrayal caught on tape. Sister of the bride implicated in peer wedding drama. The recording was the star. News anchors played clips, their voices dripping with manufactured shock. Social media was a wildfire of memes and condemnation. #Kiss of Doom was trending. Alistair Thorne, the golden boy, was being publicly eviscerated. His reputation, his most prized possession, was in tatters. I felt no triumph. Only a profound, bone-deep weariness. I had loved him in my way. I had built a future around him. Destroying that had felt like destroying a part of myself. At the airport, I moved through the crowds like an automaton. I checked in, went through security, and found my gate. I bought a large black coffee and drank it, staring out the massive windows at the planes taking off, carrying people away to new lives. Just as I was about to board, my personal phone, which I had kept powered off, vibrated violently in my backpack. I hesitated, then turned it on. It was a torrent of notifications, hundreds of missed calls, texts, voicemails. I ignored them all and opened a news alert. A new headline made my breath catch. Thorne Corporation stock plummets amid scandal. Board calls emergency meeting. The ruination had begun. It wasn't just personal anymore. It was financial. The merger my father had worked so hard for was undoubtedly collapsing. The Thorne empire, built on a facade of old money respectability, was showing cracks. I had thrown a stone and the entire edifice was trembling. For a moment, a sharp, guilty fear pierced my calm. The fallout would be immense. My family would be shamed, my father's business potentially damaged. Lily would be crucified in the court of public opinion. But then I remembered Alistair's voice. A means to an end. Manageable. He had viewed us all as pawns. He had believed himself untouchable. I powered the phone off again, permanently this time. I would get a new one in Iceland. I stood and joined the line to board the plane. As I settled into the wide leather seat in first class, the reality of what I had done finally began to sink in. I was alone. I had no plan beyond the next few days. I had burned my entire life to the ground. The plane taxied and then accelerated, the force pushing me back into my seat. I looked out the window as the city where I was born and raised, the city of galas and expectations and thorns, shrunk beneath me, becoming a mere pattern of lights. I had vanished. The revenge was underway. And as the wheels left the tarmac, a feeling fragile and unfamiliar began to stir in the hollow space where my anger had been. It wasn't happiness. It wasn't even relief. It was the terrifying, exhilarating sensation of absolute freedom. Iceland was a landscape born of fire and ice, a stark, beautiful antithesis to the gilded world I had left behind. The air at the Retreat Blue Lagoon was sharp and clean, scented with sulfur and the Atlantic brine. I floated in the milky blue geothermal waters, steam rising around me like a veil, and for the first time in days I truly breathed. The silence was not oppressive here. It was a healing balm. There were no prying eyes, no whispered judgments. Just the vast alien sky and the rugged black lava fields. For a week I did nothing. I slept for 12 hours at a stretch. I ate simple, nourishing food. I hiked through moss-covered trails, my camera hanging and used around my neck. I was in a state of emotional suspension, allowing the shockwaves of my actions to ripple out into a world I was no longer a part of. But the world, in the form of Liam, had a way of checking in. A secure message popped up on the new encrypted tablet I'd bought in Reykjavik. "You alive?" I smiled for the first time in what felt like years. "Barely. And thawing." "Good. Thought you'd want an update. The fallout is biblical." He proceeded to paint a picture of the ruin I had set in motion. Thorn Corporation's stock had dropped 40%. The board had forced Alistair to step down from his executive role. Major investors were pulling out. The merger with my father's firm was officially dead. My father, according to Liam's sources, was furious but also, secretly, relieved to be free of the Thorns' predatory terms. He was a proud man and the public humiliation stung, but his business would survive. The social fallout was worse. The Thorns were pariahs. They were being dropped from charity boards, uninvited from the season's most exclusive events. Alistair had become a laughingstock, a permanent fixture in tabloid hell. The recording was his Macarena, a cultural touchstone of schadenfreude that would follow him for the rest of his life. And Lily, my heart ached for Lily. She had given a single tearful interview, stating that she had been manipulated and was utterly devastated by her sister's disappearance. Public opinion was split on her. Some saw a victim, others a willing participant. She had retreated from public view entirely. "And you," Liam messaged. "You're the runaway bride avenger. You're a folk hero to some, a crazy woman to others. The press is desperate to find you." "Let them look," I typed back, my fingers steady. "They won't." "What's next, Eva? You can't float in a hot spring forever." He was right. The numbness was receding, and in its place was a vast, echoing question mark. What was I without Alistair? Without the title of Mrs. Thorne? Who was Eva, stripped bare of all the expectations? One evening, sitting in my minimalist suite with a view of the endless twilight, I finally picked up my camera. I hadn't taken a single photograph since the wedding. It had felt too connected to the dreams I'd sacrificed. I powered it on, the familiar hum of vibration in my hands. I scrolled through the old photos. Pictures of Alistair, so many of them, his smile now looking like a predator's grin. Pictures of galas and parties, my face a mask of polite enjoyment. Then I went further back to the archives from before him. There they were. The photos I'd taken in college on a study abroad trip to rural India. Candid shots of women working in fields, their faces etched with lines of sun and struggle, but their eyes blazing with resilience. Photos from a project on urban decay in Detroit, capturing stark beauty in crumbling brick and rusted steel. These were my photos. My vision. The work that my professor had called empathetic and unflinching. The work Alistair had gently mocked as a nice hobby. A hobby he had expected me to give up. As I looked at these forgotten images, a spark, long dormant, flickered back to life in the ashes of my old self. This was what I had loved. This was what I was meant to do. Not to document a life of shallow luxury, but to find the human stories in the margins of the world. An idea, audacious and terrifying, began to form. I opened my laptop and started researching. I looked up grants for documentary photographers. I looked at remote, challenging locations. My eyes kept returning to one place. The Sundarbans, the vast mangrove forest straddling India and Bangladesh. A place of breathtaking beauty and immense danger, where climate change was forcing a brutal confrontation between humans, tigers, and the rising sea. It was a story of survival of a world on the edge. It was about as far from the Grand Heritage Hotel as I could possibly get. It was perfect. I spent the next 2 days writing a proposal. I poured all my pain, my anger, my newfound clarity into it. I called it The Watery Edge, Life and Loss in the Sundarbans. I used my grandmother's maiden name, Eva Sorensen. I attached my best pre-Alistair work. I had no reputation left as Eva Thorntoby, but perhaps I could build one as Eva Sorensen, photographer. I sent the proposal to a prestigious, forward-thinking foundation known for funding environmental storytelling. It was a long shot. A Hail Mary. Then I packed my backpack again. Iceland had been my cocoon. It was time to move. I booked a flight to Kolkata, India. I didn't have the grant yet, but I had my own money, the funds I'd quietly siphoned away during my engagement. It was enough to get me started, to get me on the ground. I would fund the beginning of this project myself. It was a terrifying leap of faith, but I had already jumped from a much higher ledge. The day before my flight, I took one last hike. I stood on a cliff edge, the wind whipping my hair, the North Atlantic crashing against the black sand below. I raced my camera almost instinctively, framing the shot, the violent, beautiful chaos of the sea against the unyielding land. I pressed the shutter. The sound was decisive. Final. I was no longer the woman who had been betrayed. I was no longer the avenger. I was a photographer with a story to tell. The revenge was his to live with in his ruined world. My world was just beginning. As I turned my back on the sea and walked towards the road, towards Kolkata, towards the mangroves, I felt the last of the ashes blow away. I was not just pursuing my dreams. I was chasing down the self I had very nearly lost forever. Kolkata hit me like a physical blow, a symphony of heat, humidity, and unrelenting sound. The air was thick with the smells of diesel, spices, and decay. After the sterile silence of Iceland, it was an overwhelming assault on the senses, and I welcomed it. It was impossible to dwell on the past here. The present was too demanding, too vibrantly alive. I spent a week in the chaotic city, acquiring permits, hiring a local guide, and assembling the necessary gear for the Sundarbans. My guide was a man named Rohan, weathered and taciturn, with eyes that had seen countless tides come and go. He asked no personal questions, for which I was profoundly grateful. To him, I was Eva Sorensen, a Danish photographer here to document the mangroves. The lie was a protective shell. The journey to the islands was a slow, mesmerizing transition from the human chaos of the mainland to the primordial chaos of the estuary. We traveled on a narrow wooden boat, its puttering engine a feeble noise against the vast silence of the water world. The Ganges Delta unfolded around us, a labyrinth of muddy rivers and creeks, flanked by an impenetrable wall of tangled mangrove roots. The light was soft, filtered through a perpetual haze, painting everything in shades of silver and green. It was beautiful, and I felt its danger like a static charge in the air. Rohan took me to a small village on the edge of the reserve, a cluster of huts on stilts, clinging to the mudflat as if holding its breath against the next high tide. The people here, the Mawalis, lived a life defined by the water and the forest. Their existence was a daily negotiation with two powerful forces, the Bengal tiger and the rising sea. My first days were spent simply observing, letting people get used to the strange woman with the camera. I helped the women mend fishing nets, my clumsy fingers fumbling with the twine, earning me shy smiles. I listened to the men talk in low, worried tones about salinization, the salt water creeping further inland each year, poisoning their rice paddies and their drinking water. I started taking pictures. Not the grand, sweeping landscapes yet, but the small, intimate details. The gnarled, work-worn hands of an old fisherman. The serious eyes of a child cradling a clay pot of fresh water, their most precious commodity. The intricate patterns of tiger paw prints pressed into the mud at the village's edge, a constant, silent reminder of the price of vigilance. This was the story. Not just of environmental loss, but of human resilience. These people weren't victims waiting for a savior. They were adapters, fighters. They built higher platforms for their huts. They planted salt-resistant crops. They navigated the tiger-infested creeks with a respect that bordered on reverence. They were living on the watery edge, and their struggle was a quiet, desperate epic. One afternoon, a storm blew in from the Bay of Bengal. It wasn't a gentle rain. It was a fury. The wind howled, tearing at the thatched roofs. The rain fell in solid sheets, turning the world into a gray, roaring torrent. The river swelled, its brown water licking at the stilts of the huts. I stood in the doorway of the community hall, my camera raised, capturing the raw power of the elements. The villagers worked together with a practiced efficiency, securing boats, moving children and the elderly to the sturdiest structures. In the midst of the chaos I saw her. An older woman, her face a roadmap of wrinkles, was not helping with the emergency preparations. Instead, she was standing at the water's edge, her sari plastered to her thin frame, chanting something into the wind, her arms raised to the raging sky. She wasn't fighting the storm, she was acknowledging it, communing with it. It was the most powerful thing I had ever seen. I lifted my camera and took the shot. The woman, a tiny, defiant figure against the immense, chaotic force of nature. It was the heart of my project. The struggle, the respect, the acceptance. When the storm finally passed, leaving a world washed clean and dripping, I felt a sense of peace I hadn't known was possible. The problems here were immense and real. Loss of land, poverty, danger. But the spirit was immense too. My own troubles, the betrayal and the revenge began to feel small and distant, like a story about someone else. That night, sitting by a kerosene lamp, I checked my encrypted email on my tablet. There was one message. From the Foundation. With a heart thudding against my ribs, I opened it. Dear Miss Sorensen, it began. We were profoundly impressed by your proposal, The Watery Edge. Your visual samples demonstrate a remarkable eye for capturing the human spirit within vast environmental narratives. We are pleased to inform you that your project has been selected for a full grant. I stopped reading. The words blurred. A sob, half laugh, half cry escaped my lips. I clutched the tablet to my chest, tears streaming down my face, mingling with the humid air. It wasn't just the money. It was the validation. Eva Sorensen, the photographer, existed. She had value. Her vision had meaning. Rohan looked over from where he was cleaning his pipe, his expression unreadable. Good news? He asked in his broken English. I looked at him, at the simple, sturdy hut, at the star-dusted sky through the open doorway. The ghost of the emerald ring felt 1,000,000 miles away. The best, I whispered, my voice thick with emotion. I was no longer running away. I had arrived. In the midst of this struggling, beautiful, watery world, I had found not just a story but a purpose. And for the first time since I'd walked down that aisle, the future didn't feel like an empty space. It felt like a photograph waiting to be taken. Months bled into one another, marked not by dates on a calendar but by the turning of the tides and the rhythm of life in the Sundarbans. The grant money allowed me to work without the gnawing anxiety of funds running out. I immersed myself completely, my Danish alias identity solidifying into a reality I lived and breathed. My work was gaining a quiet reputation. Under the name Eva Sorensen, I'd started a blog, uploading my photos and essays whenever I made the arduous trip back to Kolkata for supplies. An environmental magazine picked up one of my pieces. Then a larger international publication contacted me, interested in a feature. The Runaway Bride Avenger was a fading tabloid memory, replaced by the emerging respected voice of Eva Sorensen, documentarian. It was during one of these supply trips, in a noisy internet cafe smelling of strong coffee and sweat, that the ghost of my past life reached out. I was checking the secure email I used only for Liam when I saw it. A message forwarded by him from an address I didn't recognize. The subject line was, "I know it's you." My blood ran cold. I almost deleted it, my finger hovering over the button. But curiosity, that old dangerous beast, won out. Eva, I don't know if you'll ever read this. Liam's firewalls are impressive, but money and desperation are powerful motivators. I paid a man a small fortune to find a crack. I hope he was worth it. I saw your photos. The one of the old woman in the storm. It's all over the photography sites now. They're calling it defiant. I knew it was you the moment I saw it. No one else sees the world like you do. You always had that gift, even when you tried to hide it. I am ruined. You succeeded in that beyond your wildest dreams. My father hasn't spoken to me in 6 months. The company my grandfather built is a shadow of itself. I live in a rented flat, a laughingstock, as the papers so kindly put it. Every day is a punishment. You wanted revenge? You have it. It is total. I am not writing to ask for forgiveness. I don't deserve it. What I did to you and to Lily was unforgivable. I was arrogant and blind. I saw people as assets and liabilities. You were the best asset and I was too stupid to see you were the only one that ever mattered. I just needed you to know that I see you now. I see Eva Sorensen. And she is magnificent. Alistair. I sat back in the rickety chair, the sounds of the internet cafe fading into a dull roar. My hands were trembling. I read the email again and then a third time, dissecting every word for manipulation for his old polished charm. But it wasn't there. The tone was raw, stripped bare. It was the voice of a man who had lost everything and had nothing left to lose by telling the truth. He was ruined. He had admitted it. The words "you have it. It is total" should have brought me a surge of triumph. Instead they left me feeling hollow. The fiery anger that had sustained me was long gone, and in its place was a quiet pity. He was a ghost just as I had been, haunting the ruins of a life he had destroyed with his own hubris. And he had seen my photograph. He had recognized me in it. Not the society bride, not the avenger, but the artist. That, more than anything, was what undid me. I didn't reply. I closed the email and shut down the computer. I walked out into the chaotic Kolkata street, the honking cars and shouting vendors a welcome distraction. His words echoed in my mind. You were the only one that ever mattered. It was a lie he was telling himself now in his despair. Or was it? Did it even matter? The chapter was closed. The revenge was complete. Any lingering, poisonous threads of connection were severed by that single, stark communication. He was a part of my past, a cautionary tale, a villain in the story of how I found myself. But he was no longer the author of my story. I returned to the Sundarbans a few days later, the humid embrace of the mangroves feeling more like home than the grand heritage ever had. I didn't tell Rohan about the email. I simply picked up my camera and went back to work. But something had shifted. A final, invisible weight had been lifted. The last ghost had been acknowledged and laid to rest. My work felt different, freer. I was no longer documenting this world as an escape from my own. I was documenting it because I was a part of it, however small and temporary. I was lying in my hammock one evening, listening to the chorus of frogs and night insects, when my satellite phone buzzed. It was Liam. Just got a very interesting alert, he said, his voice crackly with the distance. A massive, anonymous donation was just made to the World Wildlife Fund's Sundarbans Preservation Project. 6 figures. Untraceable. Ring any bells? I was silent for a moment, watching a firefly blink its coded message in the dark. A gesture of penance? A desperate attempt to buy a shred of redemption? Or simply the action of a man who had finally learned to see value in something beyond his own ego? I have no idea what you're talking about, Liam, I said softly. He chuckled. Yeah, I didn't think so. Anyway, the new batch of photos is stunning. The National Geographic editors are drooling. Eva Sorensen is about to become a very big deal. Good, I said, and I meant it. I ended the call and looked out at the starlit river. Alistair Thorne was a ghost in the machine of my past, and he would remain there. My future was here in the tangled, beautiful, watery real world, through the lens of my camera. The revenge was over. The vanishing was complete. Now there was only the dream, and it was more vivid and real than anything that had come before. The National Geographic feature was published under the title, The Defiant Shore, Life on the Sundarbans' Watery Edge. Carried my name, Eva Sorensen, in a bold, elegant font. The centerpiece was the photograph of the old woman, Malati, standing against the storm. The magazine had blown it up across 2 pages, and the effect was breathtaking. You could feel the wind, the rain, the fierce, spiritual defiance in her eyes. The response was immediate and overwhelming. My secure inbox flooded with requests for interviews, for speaking engagements, for book deals. Environmental organizations reached out wanting to use my work for their campaigns. The grant money was now a mere footnote. Eva Sorensen was a name with currency. I accepted a few select interviews, always done via encrypted video call from Kolkata, my face pixelated, my voice slightly altered. I spoke not about my past but about the present. The science of salinization, the cultural resilience of the Maali people, the urgent global story playing out in this specific fragile ecosystem. I talked about Malati and how she had taught me that facing an overwhelming force wasn't always about fighting it, but about standing your ground with unwavering spirit. The world was listening. Donations to the local conservation NGOs I recommended skyrocketed. For the first time, I felt the tangible power of my work. It wasn't just art, it was a catalyst. It was the opposite of the destructive power I had wielded against Alistair. This was a power to build, to protect, to illuminate. It was during this whirlwind that a new email landed in my professional inbox. The sender was Dr. Eris Thorne. My breath hitched. Eris was Alistair's younger brother, the black sheep of the family. While Alistair had been groomed for the corporate throne, Eris had disappeared into the world of academia, becoming a renowned marine biologist. I had always liked him. He was quiet, thoughtful, and had eyes that actually saw you. Dear Ms. Sorensen, the email began formally. I hope this email finds you well. I have been following your work on the Sundarbans with immense admiration. Your combination of artistic skill and scientific empathy is rare and desperately needed. I am writing to you from a research vessel in the South Pacific, where I am leading a study on coral reef bleaching. We are documenting the story, but we are failing to communicate it in a way that moves people to action. Your Defiant Shore piece is a masterclass in that communication. I am applying for a significant long-term grant to expand our work into community-based conservation and storytelling. I would be honored if you would consider coming on board as the project's visual documentarian. It would be a 2-year commitment, traversing some of the most remote and beautiful islands on Earth. I understand this is a significant request. The conditions would be challenging. But I believe together we could create something truly important. Yours sincerely, Eris Thorne. I read the email 3 times. A job offer. From a Thorne. The irony was so thick it was almost laughable. But it wasn't from that Thorne. This was Eris. This was real. And it was terrifying. It meant stepping out of the relative safety of my solo work and into a collaboration. It meant facing the ghost of the Thorne name, albeit a different one. It meant trusting someone from that world again. I didn't reply immediately. I spent a week in the village thinking. I showed the children the National Geographic magazine. Melody, when I pointed to her picture, simply nodded, a faint, knowing smile on her lips. She had never asked about my past, but I felt she understood journeys and the scars they leave. I thought about Alistair's email. You were the only one that ever mattered. It was a sentiment born of loss. Eris's offer was born of professional respect. They were worlds apart. Finally, I video called Liam. Eris Thorne, I said without preamble. He whistled. The good one. Smart. Serious. And according to my sources, completely estranged from the family since your dramatic exit. He publicly condemned Alistair's behavior. That's what I thought, I said, feeling a knot in my stomach loosen. So, what are you going to do? I'm going to say yes, I heard myself say, the decision feeling right as the words left my mouth. But on one condition. We meet first. Neutral ground. I need to look him in the eye. A month later I was in Singapore, a neutral, buzzing metropolis. I waited in the air-conditioned quiet of a botanical garden orchid house, a world away from the muddy creeks of the Sundarbans. I was nervous, my palms damp. He was on time. Eris Thorne looked older than I remembered, his face tanned and lined from years at sea. He had the same strong Thorne features as his brother, but on him they looked thoughtful, not arrogant. His eyes, a warmer brown than Alistair's cool blue, found me immediately, and he offered a small, genuine smile. Eva, he said, his voice softer, deeper. He didn't offer a handshake, just a slight, respectful nod. Or do you prefer Sorensen now? Eva is fine, I said, my own voice steady. Thank you for coming. We walked through the orchids, their bizarre, beautiful shapes a silent audience. We didn't speak of the past. We spoke of the future. Of coral polyps and ocean acidification. Of the importance of pairing data with narrative. Of the specific communities in Micronesia he hoped to work with. His passion was infectious, his intelligence undeniable. He saw the world not as a system to be dominated, but as a web to be understood and protected. He never once mentioned Alistair. He never offered pity or awkward apologies for his family. He treated me as a peer. An equal. After an hour we stopped by a stunning blood-red orchid. The project, he said, finally circling back to it. It's a huge commitment. I need to know you're all in. No ghosts. I looked at this good man from a bad family who had chosen a different path. I saw no deception in his eyes, only a clear, focused light. The same light I saw in the eyes of the people of the Sundarbans. The light of purpose. My ghosts are where they belong, I said, meeting his gaze squarely. In the past. He held my look for a long moment, then nodded, a slow, sure smile spreading across his face. Good. Then welcome aboard, Eva. As we walked out of the orchid house into the humid Singapore afternoon, I felt a strange sense of completion. The circle wasn't closing, it was expanding. I had left a man who saw the world as a transaction. I was now joining a man who saw it as a collaboration. The revenge had been my finale. This, with Eris under the bright, impartial sun, felt like a beginning. A second chance, not at love but at purpose, with a partner who valued the very thing my first betrothed had tried to extinguish. The light of my own vision. The research vessel, the Odyssey, was a world of white paint, humming generators, and the constant gentle rock of the sea. It was my new home. For the first few weeks I was disoriented, learning the rhythms of shipboard life, the personalities of the international crew of scientists and sailors, and the complex, meticulous work of marine biology. Eris was a calm and capable leader. In the lab he was all focused intensity, his hands moving with precision over water samples and coral fragments. On deck, watching a sunset paint the sky in violent shades of orange and purple, he was quiet, contemplative. Our professional relationship was easy, built on a shared, obsessive drive to do the work well. We spoke the same language. The language of light, composition, salinity levels, and stakeholder engagement. The ghosts were silent. The crew knew my history, they never showed it. I was Eva, the photographer. Eris was the lead scientist. That was all that mattered here on the blue vastness of the Pacific. Our first major stop was a small, low-lying atoll in the Federated States of Micronesia. The story was a heartbreaking echo of the Sundarbans, but with a different face. Here the rising sea wasn't just salinating fields, it was swallowing homes. The coconut trees stood with their roots in the salt water, dying slow, visible deaths. The village elders showed us the sacred grounds of their ancestors, now regularly flooded by high tides. I documented it all. The weary resignation in the chief's eyes as he pointed to the waterline creeping up the community meeting house. The determined joy of the children, swimming in the lagoon that was both their playground and their impending doom. I worked from dawn until dusk, my camera a bridge between their reality and the world that needed to see it. One evening, Eris found me on the aft deck, reviewing the day's shots on my laptop. The sky was a deep indigo, the first stars pricking through. "These are powerful, Eva," he said softly, looking over my shoulder at an image of a young mother holding her baby, their silhouettes against the dying light, the encroaching sea at their feet. "It's their story," I replied, my voice thick with a mixture of awe and sorrow. "I'm just the conduit." "You're more than that," he said. He leaned against the railing facing me. The running lights of the ship cast a soft glow on his face. "You have a way of capturing not just the loss but the love. The love for this place, for their home. That's what makes people care. Data doesn't do that. Love does." His words settled deep inside me, a validation that went beyond professional praise. He saw the heart of my work because he had one himself. "We're making a difference here," I said, not as a question but as a statement of newfound faith. "We are," he affirmed. "The preliminary report paired with your photos has already sparked a conversation with the regional government. It's a start." We stood in comfortable silence for a while, listening to the water slosh against the hull. The air between us, usually filled with talk of work, felt different. "Tarch. I heard from my mother," Eris said, his tone shifting, becoming heavier. "Alistair has checked himself into a rehab facility. For depression and, she says, a re-evaluation of his life choices." I absorbed the information. There was no schadenfreude, no pity. Just a distant, quiet acknowledgement. "I hope he finds some peace," I said, and I realized I meant it. The anger was so far behind me it felt like a fossil. "He's a long way from that," Eris said. He turned to look at me fully, his expression serious. "Eva, what he did to you, what my family represented. I need you to know that I am not them. I spent my whole life running from that legacy. I chose this." He gestured to the ship, the sea, "to get as far away from that world as I could." "I know," I said. And I did. I could see it in every line of his sun-weathered face, in every passionate word he spoke about his work. "I'm not asking for anything," he continued, his voice low and earnest. "I value your partnership and your friendship more than I can say. But you should know, being around you, seeing your strength, your talent, your compassion, it's been a light in the darkness for me too." My breath caught in my throat. This was not the grand, performative declaration of love I was used to. This was quiet. It was an admission of shared ground, of a similar journey out of darkness. I didn't know what to say. The scars of betrayal were old, but they were still there, a faint map on my heart. Trust was a currency I had spent recklessly once and had been slow to earn again. "Eris," I began, my voice barely a whisper. He held up a hand, a gentle smile touching his lips. "You don't have to say anything. I just wanted you to know. The light is there. I see it. That's enough for now." He pushed off the railing and gave my shoulder a brief, warm squeeze before heading back towards the lab, leaving me alone with the vast starry sky and the rhythmic breath of the ocean. I looked out at the horizon, a perfect, unbroken line between sea and sky. It was a different horizon from the one I had faced in the Sundarbans, and different still from the gilded cage of my past. It was wide open, full of mystery and promise. I wasn't the same woman who had thrown a ring in a liar's face. I wasn't even the same woman who had found solace in the defiant shore. I was stronger, quieter, more sure. The revenge was a closed chapter. The vanished life was a forgotten country. Here, on the deck of a ship at the edge of the world, with the ghost of a second chance hanging in the salt-tinged air, I finally understood. I hadn't just been pursuing my dreams. I had been building a new self, piece by piece from the ashes up. And as the first tears I had shed in a long time, tears not of pain but of a profound, quiet joy, welled in my eyes and blurred the brilliant stars, I knew that whatever this new horizon held, I was ready for it. I was at long last completely and unshakably myself. The end.